Հանրաճանաչ վիրաբույժ բժիշկ Ջան Վարդանյանը մասնագիտացել է դեմքի գեղագիտական վիրաբուժության մարզում։ Նրա շքեղ գրասենյակը արդիական սարքերով ծառայում է իր հաճախորդներին, նրանց դեմքերին տալով բնական արդյունքներ։ Վարկավորված բժիշկ Վարդանյանը ուսուցանում է UCLA-ում եւ USC-ում։ Նրա մասնագիտությունը ընդգրկում է քթի եւ կոպերի վիրաբուժություն, դեմքի վերաթարմացում, ճառագայթային գործողություններ եւ վարսատնկում։ Զանգահարեք մեզ վիրաբուժական կամ այլ սպասարկությունների ցանկի համար։
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Your Health TV program. I'm Dr. Vicken Sepilian, your host, and today we have in our virtual studio a great group of guests that we're going to talk about a very important project. I'd like to introduce our guest today, Dr. Salpy Akaragian. Dr. Salpy Akaragian is joining us in her capacity as founder and chairperson of the Armenian International Medical Fund, AIM Fund, who's been involved over many decades in various projects in Armenia. Today, we're going to be focusing on a new initiative called the Armenia Project. We also have with us Shogher Nalbandian. Shogher is a genetic counselor with expertise in genetic diseases. Her current position is with Natera, which is a biotech company with specialties in women's health and genetics. We also have with us Professor Evgeni Sokurenko, who's a physician and professor of genetics at University of Washington. And many of you already know Professor Wayne Grody, who's been on our program previously and has been in various projects before. Professor Grody is a physician in the genetics department at UCLA. Welcome everybody to our program today. And so, Dr. Akaragian, I'd like to start with you, if you can tell us a little bit about the AIM Fund, some of the history, and some of the projects that historically the organization has been engaged in.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Sepilian, for giving us the opportunity to continue informing the public about our projects. The Armenian International Medical Fund was created in 2003. And for the last over 20 years now, we've been doing different projects in Armenia. The purpose of the foundation is to create innovative healthcare projects in Armenia. And we started with cochlear implants, as most of you know. And we have done over 250 cases already in Armenia. And in 2016, we embarked another project, which is called UCLA Armenia Project, which is looking to the Armenian human genomes and trying to understand exactly what kind of genes are causing medical illnesses in the Armenian population. So we'll talk about this later when Dr. Sokurenko and Dr. Grody give us more information about the research and its findings. We are delighted as a foundation to take this another innovative project under our wings, and we are looking forward to continue our collaboration.
That's excellent. And I'd like to ask Professor Grody a little bit about how this project came to be.
Sure, and thank you for having us, Vicken. It's always great to reconnect with you. You already know some of my backstory because I've been on your program before. So I met Salpy and you originally because I am an attending physician in UCLA's Familial Mediterranean Fever Clinic, FMF, a disorder very familiar to your viewers, often called the Armenian disease, although we don't call it that. And I gave a talk on that subject at your organization, shown here, when it was held in Hollywood in Los Angeles about 10 years ago. And that's when I was interviewed. Salpy came over and told me about the plans for this project, and it got launched from there. The reason I was attracted to it as a geneticist, besides my love of the Armenian people, which I've gotten over the years having so many Armenian American patients, geneticists like fairly homogeneous populations to work with, whether you're working with mice or fish or humans. And the Armenian people may well be the most ancient homogeneous population on Earth. I learned that after we got started. Older than Christians, Jews, Muslims, maybe as much as 8,000 years, and isolated because of its geography. So it's an ideal population to study genes and genomics and to unearth some rare mutations that might not be known, but could be very helpful, not just to Armenians over there, also in the diaspora, as well as general populations.
Indeed. And we have, I know that one of the keynote talks that you gave at the 11th Armenian Medical World Congress, which was held in Hollywood. At the time, we talked about familial Mediterranean fever, which has been a long time specialty of yours. You're considered to be one of the world's experts on this. Professor Sokurenko, I'd like to ask what your involvement has been as it pertains to the AIM funds and the Armenia initiative that it currently is being not, I shouldn't say launch, but there's an inaugural event to educate and inform the public.
Yes. First of all, thank you, Vicken, for having me. It's so great to share about the Armenia project with everyone. Armenia project actually was started a few years ago, or at least the idea, and we started to implement it a few years ago. As you can guess by my name, I'm not necessarily Armenian, yet at least, yes, I'm Ukrainian, but my wife is Armenian, also a doctor, she's an ophthalmologist here in Seattle, and her brother, my brother-in-law, Dr. Avakian, is also a physician and administrator in Armenia, involved in multiple large medical projects. My specialty here in University of Washington has been populations called genetics, where we study many different mutations spread in many different individuals. And I said once to my Savak, my brother-in-law, you know what, why don't we develop a test, genetic test, that will be tailored to Armenians? As Dr. Grody just said, we suspected a lot that, because it is so Asian population, so homogeneous, what we say, we are not admixed too much with others, should be a very good panel that will be really tailored towards Armenians, like we have a panel, for example, for Ashkenazi Jews. And, developing of such panels had been under progress and actually very successful in some nations like Finland, Iceland, in Estonia, and, even a panel for Amish people here in America. So I wondering, what, we should try to do it. So we actually did start. We started the analysis of a so far limited number, 350 people only, which is not very big number for such studies. And we have some very exciting data, which I would love to share with you.
Great. That's and I do remember when initially the memorandum of understanding was signed at UCLA. Salpy, thank you for having me present for that. I just took a peek at my phone to see if I could find some of the photos from that event. I'm sure they're in there somewhere. Shogher, I'd like to ask you, you're a genetic counselor. You're in the practical aspect of it, all the science and the research that goes in comes back to now from bench to patient, and you're at the forefront of this. You're the one who gets those results, and you're talking to patients on a day in and day out basis. tell me a little bit about your involvement with AIM Fund and the Armenia project.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Sepilian, for having us on the show as well. As far as my involvement, I am chairing the inaugural gala that we have for Armenia. I joined the AIM Fund last year, so it's been 1 year. I started out with the cochlear as being the biggest project that the AIM Fund has. But when I heard about the Armenia project, that was something of particular interest to me, being a genetic counselor. I think the potential that lies ahead is incredible with this one. As anytime you have a group of ethnic groups, the risk for conditions, prevalent conditions would be higher in those ethnicities. So it's such an important project to have. We're excited what the findings are, and hopefully we can relay these findings to, population, to our patients. Now, the interesting and the most fascinating part about all of this is that there's a high interest and enthusiasm about the project and its findings amongst the younger Armenian generation. So whether it's about learning about their own conditions or genetic risks that they themselves could be at an increased risk for, or even as healthcare professionals, they're already starting to think, well, how can I implement these testing strategies or these findings into their future practice to better serve their patients? So the hopes of this is hopefully, once we find the prevalent conditions that run higher in the Armenian ethnicity, is to develop a screening test to present and be available for providers so they can better screen their patients. So
that's very exciting, and really it's one of the cutting edge frontiers in medicine, where as we have all begun to understand the huge role genetics plays in essentially everything, anywhere from predisposition to diseases, to the way we are, our physical, our mental health even, could all be linked to the ways the genes that we have and the way that these genes interact with our environment. Shogher, can you tell us a little bit about this event, the gala, the inaugural gala that you are the chairperson of?
Absolutely. So our gala is coming up. Our Armenia's inaugural gala dinner will take place this coming Sunday, February 16th at Vertigo Event Venue in Glendale, with cocktail and silent auction starting at 4:30 p.m., followed by the dinner program at 5:30. It's a night to raise awareness of this unique Armenian genome project and to celebrate our honorees, including Dr. Grody, the Promised Armenian Institute at UCLA, and Mrs. Arpi Mazlumian from the Sera Chichian Charitable Foundation. It's also a night filled with musical performances, and we are also honored to have you, Dr. Sepilian, as our MC for the evening.
Of course, I'm looking forward to it, and anybody can come and participate and help support this cause, either in person or through donations. Is that correct?
Absolutely. We do have limited seating available. More information can be found on our website. It's www.armenianimf.org. We look forward to seeing everyone on February 16th. If you cannot make it, you're willing to make a donation, that information can also be found on our website.
Very good. Thank you. And I would encourage everybody who is watching, please do participate in however you can, whether it's through in person, come and support the event. The information again is on your screen. You can scan the QR code. It will provide the information that we need. The event will take place this coming Sunday, February 16th. Sunday afternoon, early evening. It will be a lovely event. Hopefully you all can come and participate, make a small donation or make a large donation if you can. So anything will be appreciated. I'd like to come back now and talk about some of the research and the science that has already been done. So my questions to Professor Grody and Professor Sokurenko, if you can share with us some of the preliminary work that has been done, and already some data has been presented, if we can touch up a little bit on the science on this.
Sure, I'll be glad to start in a general overview, and then Evgeni can give some specifics. Vicken, you and Shogher spend a good part of your working day screening patients for mutations they may have that are silent in them, but could show up as a disorder in their offspring. I think before we got on the air, you said you order a test with about 600 different genes in it. Nothing like that is being done in Armenia because it's a resource-poor country. They may screen for a couple of things, and the same for newborn screening. It's nowhere near as far along as here. So our hope is to identify diseases, gene mutations that are higher than expected in this particular population, and then develop a very inexpensive screening test that could be used population wide. So this project, it's not only fascinating for me as a geneticist from a scientific point of view, but we believe it'll have real world public health benefits. I want to highlight one other thing about it before we forget. The work I presented in Yerevan in 2023, as you know, we did this work at that time specifically on individuals from Artsakh. So this was a very sad time. It was during the blockade, so they were still in Artsakh. Now everybody's gone, sadly. And that group in particular is very isolated, so it appeals to us. And to our knowledge, no one has studied them at the genomic level like we have. So we have indeed identified some very important disease genes in hearing loss, cancer, other things that may well be good targets for population screening. And I'll let Evgeni give a little more detail.
Yes, certainly. Wayne already outlined quite well how the study had been going. And I'm very happy to share with you guys something preliminary. As I mentioned before, so we decided to focus originally on Artsakh population as a really probably homogeneous within Armenians, homogeneous of the homogeneous we call. But we also compared them later to people from Yerevan who are not associated with Artsakh, and all of them were pretty much randomly chosen. So in totally, we analyze 147 individuals from Artsakh and 192 individuals from Yerevan in Armenia. And the exciting thing I want to tell right away that, you know, the number of these bad mutations, bad genes per capita in Armenia is actually less than on average in the world. So Armenians are actually overall healthy people, which is wonderful. And actually, people from Artsakh seems to be even more on average healthy genetically, at least. So genetically, Armenians are healthy people. What we also found, however, that at this point, 14 mutations in the genome are found in Armenians at a much higher frequency than found globally. First of all, very important, this is doesn't mean that Armenians are, again, more sick genetically people. No, they are actually quite healthy. However, the beauty is that we actually know which diseases we can target now to identify, to make it even more healthier. Some of the findings were expected, as you know, and Dr. Grody is well, especially the familiar Mediterranean fever, or it's called periodic disease, also is certainly the prevalence is, as expected, quite high. On average, 1 in 8 people carry the gene. Doesn't mean that all of them sick. It takes 2 parents to carry this bad gene for a child to be sick. So it's actually, probability is not that high, but certainly much higher. And I would say it's about 500 times or at least 200 times higher than average in the world. So that sort of was expected. But then we found something new. We found that actually 1 in 16 people in Armenia, they might carry a gene that actually predispose them for gastrointestinal cancer, for stomach cancer. It's, again, the problem with this gene, however, that it might not take two parents to show up in child. We call it a dominant gene, so that it's predisposing it. And we really need to look more carefully into this, because if people have the genes, there is so many ways that this could be prevented or early diagnosed at least. We also found some interesting finding about visual problems, loss of vision in children. And yeah, that's again, if not preventable, it's very good to diagnose very fast. Some of them actually development preventable. Deafness, people, yeah, children losing hearing, and we did find these genes indeed. Again, there are much more prevalent than in other populations, but we can diagnose them, we can find them quite easily. And that's actually what would be our goals for future. Some other bleeding disorders we found very interesting pathologies. Yeah, but again, overall, Armenians are healthy, but there is ways to make it them even healthier. More details will be at our gala.
Of course, of course. And these are some great points that you made, Professor. And I'm going to ask Shogher if you can maybe clarify a little bit more of the concept of some conditions that require both parents to be a carrier, and the point that being a carrier is completely silent. I know from a clinical standpoint, I sometimes have to spend a lot of time explaining to patients, because if you say, hey, there is this genetic condition that your child may be at risk of developing, and the patients, I'll get back saying, we don't have any genetic conditions in our family. We're totally clean. My parents, my grandparents, great-grandparents, nobody has any genetic conditions. Shogher, this is, I know, your day-to-day specialty. If you can explain these nuances of autosomal recessive and autosomal or otherwise dominant conditions.
Right, so in genetics, we have a variety of inheritance that we discuss based on the gene and the condition we come across. One example I can provide for autosomal recessive, if we talk about familial Mediterranean fever, for example, the gene being MEFV, when we say you are a carrier, that means we found a mutation in one copy of this MEFV gene. Now, keep in mind, you still have another copy of this gene on your other chromosome where a mutation would not be detected. Most carriers have no symptoms that are associated. However, there's a small percentage of individuals who are carriers may present with symptoms. So for those cases, we recommend further follow-up. But what does this mean as far as reproductive purposes? For a recessive condition, if both parents are carriers, again, most of the time, no symptoms that they would show, there would be a 25% chance a pregnancy or a child could inherit those mutations at the same time and be at risk for the recessive condition. So if you think of it as if each copy of the gene has a mutation, that knocks out the function of the gene. So if both copies are not working of the gene for a recessive condition, you would present with symptoms. So if both parents are carriers, 25% chance for an affected pregnancy, inheriting two mutations, 75% of the chance a pregnancy would not be affected. Now, if we cross the realm to dominant inheritance, so for autosomal dominant inheritance, such as certain types of cancers can be dominant, for example, a mutation in just one copy of the gene may put that individual, to have symptoms, be at risk for the condition. And as far as a risk to a pregnancy, it would be 50% chance of passing that mutation to an offspring, and they themselves can also be at risk for that condition. Of course, we have other inheritance patterns like X-linked conditions, where similar concept for X-linked dominant, like Fragile X is just a common condition. If there's a mutation in an X-linked condition, still 50% chance of passing it on from the maternal end. That does get a little complex because, of course, the paternal genetics come into play as well. But that's just in general overview. It really depends on the condition, the gene, and the mutations we're dealing with.
Of course, yeah. And really, this can be complicated at times, and hence we are thankful of, the expert panel that we have here who study these interactions of these genes and show, specialists like you who can actually explain it to us so that we can, counsel our patients and take preventative steps accordingly. And we did talk about, and I say this to my patients all the time, we all are carriers of something, right? There's it all depends on how big of a can of worms you want to open, right? We all have something. It all depends on how carefully, and carefully may not be the right word, how sort of specifically you look. Many of the genes that we may be carriers of may not result in a significant condition, and oftentimes, more times than none, worry the patients more than they really ought to be worried about. But severe conditions, things that predispose one to cancer, and cancers that actually have screening tests that if indeed that genetic predisposition now has resulted in an actual cancer that can be screened and diagnosed early, then that genetic test now could potentially save somebody's life. And not talking about, also prevent the transmission to future generations. In reality, tests like this can really save people's lives. And as the expert panel said, that oftentimes these types of genetic predispositions can be driven by ethnicity, and especially with cultures like Armenians, who have over millennia have stayed relatively isolated. So even more effective the ability of those tests to pick up potentially serious preventable diseases. So with that, I'd like to commend the AIM Foundation team for taking on this Armenia initiative, and I've really like to commend our scientific experts, Professor Sokurenko and Professor Grody, for really doing this groundbreaking work for the Armenian population, because really this has a huge potential to make a big difference in the health of the people who may benefit from this. Salpy, I'll let you take the last 30 to 60 seconds to, again, reflect on the gala and the project. Like I said, Sunday, February 16th, please scan the QR code that's on your screen, and hopefully we'll see you there. Salpy, closing comments, please.
Yes. Well, this event is going to be so special, and I think it's because we have several medical students attending the event. As Shogher said, the youth is interested in genetics because the medicine is moving towards prescriptive medicine. And we have a number of guests coming from, one from Armenia, Dr. Vicken, then we have people from San Francisco attending. We have actor Bill Pullman will be there at the event. So it's a little different. Yes, it's scientific, but it's also going to be an event that a lot of people are going to meet different people than we have done in the past. So I look forward to seeing you there. And I believe you will enjoy the evening in addition to learning about Armenian genetics.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Grody. Thank you, Professor Sokurenko. Thank you, Shogher and Salpy. I look forward to the event, and I'd like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Until we see you, please stay healthy and have a good night.
Thank you.